Hi, I'm Annalee, and this is my YouTube knitting journal. My name is Annalee, and I live in Seattle, Washington. I have 3 large dogs, 2 teenage children, and 1 handsome Latino husband. I decided to start this YouTube channel this year as a personal challenge to myself, to push myself out of my comfort zone, to become more comfortable with putting myself out there, even though I'm not perfect, and to have a fun new way to document the hobby that I love so much. I'm really glad that I've done it. I've already started to experience some of the benefits that I was hoping to, and I'm having a lot of fun. As a recap, one thing that I'm focusing on and going to be talking about a lot on this channel in my journal is a kind of long-term goal or commitment that I have to complete all of the unfinished sweaters that are in my stash. So what I mean by that is that I have several sweater quantities of yarn that I already have patterns picked out for. So I know what projects I want to make. I just need to knit them. My yarn buying outpaced my actual knitting over the last few years, even though I do knit a lot. And I want to be able to maximize the joy that I get from my yarn. It's fun to buy it, it's fun to have it, but it's not going to bring me as much joy sitting in storage as it is if I actually use it to complete beautiful garments, either for myself or for people that I love. Now, I said several sweater quantities of yarn, but it actually came to 45, which is pretty embarrassing. There's no reason for one person, at least for me, to have that much just accumulated and not being used. So I'm hoping that within 3 years, I can work through those 45 sweaters. I've got 1 down. I'm working on the 2nd. And to make it a little bit more exciting, to inject a little dopamine rush in there, I am using a Python program that I wrote. It's actually just very simple. It's a random number generator to choose each project that I cast on. So I ran the program, it chose one of my unfinished sweaters at random, and that's the project that I cast on first. And then I ran the program again to determine which project I would work on next. And I will talk about my progress on that project in a few minutes. Let me tell you about what I am wearing today. This is the Rose cardigan. It's a pattern by Andrea Mowry. I finished this last year, and boy was it a doozy of a project. It involves a lot of interesting elements. So it has cables, it has a yarn fade, so it changes from one color to another. It has exposed seams. It has this interesting and unique sideways construction. So I learned a lot of kind of interesting techniques and things about construction from doing this project, which is exactly what I love to gain from projects that I do. The yarn that I used is a fade set from Hue Loco. It's called the Honey Juicy Fade Set. So one of their annual fall palette colors was Honey, which is this goldish yellow color. Another of their fall palette colors was Juicy, this bright pink color. And then there was a fade set of, I think it was 7 skeins of yarn altogether, maybe it was 5 skeins of yarn altogether, that fades from one color to the other. The pattern called for a sport weight yarn, but I held 2 strands of fingering weight together. So it is kind of at a firm gauge, but I like that. And it makes it kind of warm, almost more outerwear. Because I had a slightly different gauge than what the pattern called for, I did make some slight adjustments just to make it fit me better. I think I didn't do quite as many rows on the sleeves. Maybe I didn't do all of the increases, but it came out fitting me just the way that I was hoping it would. Like I said, it was a very interesting construction. You knit it in 4 quadrants. So you knit the left front and the right front and the left back and the right back, each separately. So you have those 4 pieces that you then sew together, and then you knit the bottom ribbing, and then you knit this, I guess it's not a button band, it's maybe a neck band. You knit this piece separately and sew it on. So there was a lot going on. The project took me quite a while, but I love it and I'm very proud of it now that it's finished. All right, before I show you the progress that I've made on my latest unknit sweater, I'm going to show you a few other things that I've been working on and that I have finished over the last week and a half since I last recorded a video. First up is a pair of socks. And as you can see, these are leopard print socks. At least that is what they are supposed to look like. So my mom and I have gotten into a really fun routine of having an early morning Skype call a couple times a week where we knit together. So I've at this point done a lot more knitting than she has, and I have over the past few years voraciously consumed all sorts of information about knitting through books and other people's YouTube channels and reading forums on Ravelry. And so now, even though my mom is the one that taught me the first little basics of knitting, I am getting to teach her some about knitting. And she wanted to learn to knit a pair of socks. So we have been working on this pair of socks together. And it was actually just this morning that we finished the toes. We grafted the toe. These socks are worked cuff down. There is kind of an afterthought heel, although on this pair of socks I decided to try a technique that I had seen Roxanne Richardson describe on her YouTube channel, and she calls it an insta-thought heel or a plain heel. The way it works is that when you get to the point where you want to insert the heel, you put the instep stitches on hold, you provisionally cast on some, I guess, bottom of the foot stitches, and then you work the heel in the round, doing decreases, really in the same exact way that you would work a toe, a standard wedge toe. Then you pick up the stitches that were being held, and you pick up the provisional stitches and knit down to the toe. So that was a little bit different than the instructions for the socks that came with this yarn described, but I really liked it, and I think that is a technique that I would use again. Speaking of the yarn, this is some yarn called Kinda Magic sock yarn, and it's by Regia, in collaboration with Wool and the Gang. It's a self-patterning yarn. So if you knit at just the right tension, the colors that are printed on the yarn line up in such a way that it gives you leopard spots. One thing that I realized as I was knitting these is that I actually started this pair from the wrong end of the ball. These were supposed to have been knitted so that this section of the yarn was the leg of the sock, and this section of the yarn was the foot of the sock. And I accidentally knit it opposite. And as a result, the length of the foot is quite short. Now I could have lengthened that by making the toe longer. In fact, the way the yarn is designed is that it kind of transitions to the toe color, and then you can knit as long as you need to in that toe color before you start decreasing. But I decided once I got to this point to go ahead and start decreasing sort of right away, because I wanted to make these socks the right size to fit my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, Venus. So she has pretty small feet, and I think that lengthwise these are going to fit her quite well. They might be a little bit big around. In fact, they're a little bit big around for me. When I make these for myself, they are a little bit baggy. And that's because you do have to use the number of stitches and the gauge that is specified in the pattern that comes with the yarn if you want the leopard spots to line up and actually look like leopard spots. So these are going to be on their way to Venus as soon as I can get my butt to the post office, and hopefully she can enjoy them as around the house socks. The next thing that I'm about to show is something that I made for a gift. A friend of mine from college sent me a message last week. She recently had her third baby, and her baby needs to wear some kind of medical devices on her ears. I'm not really sure of the details, but my friend told me that strangers can often be kind of rude and intrusive, and they make comments about the medical devices. And she asked if I would be able to make a hat for her baby that would cover the ears and cover these devices so that people wouldn't ask about them and that the hat would still look cute. And I said, hell yeah, of course, I'll make your baby a hat. That is totally up my alley. I love knitting for other people, especially when I know that they're going to appreciate and use what I make for them. So I sent my friend some pictures from a few different patterns and asked her what she liked and asked her what color she'd like. And what she chose and what we decided on is the Baby Bear Balaclava by Knitting for Olive. So it's kind of hard to see the full effect without a child's head in here. But I think this is going to be a great option because it covers baby's ears. That's also going to come in handy because my friend lives in a colder place than I do. And I know that she does like to get outside and go for walks with the baby, so needs to keep her nice and warm. And I just think this turned out so stinking cute. I really love all of the patterns that I have made so far by Knitting for Olive. This is maybe the 4th or 5th pattern that I've made, and I just think they're really clever in the design and the shaping. I might even say that Knitting for Olive is my favorite designer right now. So very cute. The yarn is, it's DK weight yarn from Goosey Fibers. Goosey Fibers is probably my favorite independent yarn dyer. This yarn is actually left over from a set that I had purchased a few years ago. I purchased a fade set that was inspired by the character Margot from the Royal Tenenbaums. So it was a fade from like a darker shade to a lighter shade of this dusty pink. And I used it to make actually another Andrea Mowry pattern called Fade Neve. I think that's how it's pronounced, Neve. So I had a little bit left of one of the colors, and this was the perfect use for it because it takes about 50 grams of DK weight yarn is all to make a darling little hat. So again, once I can get my butt to the post office, this will be on its way to my friend's little baby girl. Now, as I was knitting the baby bear balaclava for my friend's daughter, I remembered that there are 2 colleagues of mine at work that just recently had babies. And I do love knitting baby gifts for people. Most of the people that I work with know that I'm a knitter and that I'm very passionate about it. They know that every time they see me, I'm wearing at least one thing that's been hand knit. So I wanted to knit some baby gifts for both of these colleagues. And I liked that baby bear balaclava pattern so much that is what I made. So we have 2 more baby bear balaclavas. Now this one in this kind of yellow orangish color that has speckles of red and there's some little brown speckles in there. This is some yarn that I actually dyed myself. I don't know a lot about dyeing yarn. It's something that I have done a handful of times here and there just for fun. It's just really exciting to throw colors into a pan and cook it up and see what the yarn looks like. But I thought that this would be a pretty good color for a little bear. This one's a little bit more wild. Kind of an abstract bear, I suppose. This is also made out of some yarn that I dyed myself. So a little bit less traditional bear color, but I think it still looks kind of cute. And one thing that's interesting is that the way that this yarn is, it ends up having these kind of micro stripes, and so you can see the direction of the knitting and how the direction of the knitting changes, which I wouldn't expect a non-knitter to think about at all, but as a knitter, it's kind of fun. So 2 more things that I need to get in the mail. So those are the projects that I have finished since the last time I recorded a video. I have just a couple more projects that are in progress that I'd like to show. Okay, the first in progress project that I have is something that I kind of cast on in a minute of spontaneity last night. My friend, the one who asked me to make a hat for her baby girl, I thought, you know what, Mama needs some warm ears too. So I had about half a skein left over of this yarn that is called Cascade Luminosa from a sweater that I knit in January. And I really like the yarn. It's a mesh tube that is filled with these black alpaca fibers. So it's super light, but it's also very, very warm and fluffy and soft. And I thought half a skein would be just the right amount for me to make like a headband ear warmer to send to my friend. I don't have a pattern. I'm just kind of winging it. I am knitting it. It's really just a tube, but I am knitting it using the double knitting technique. So it's a technique that is described much better than I could describe it by Lucy Neatbee, where you can knit in a small circumference, and you're essentially doing it back and forth by slipping every other stitch so that you're double knitting. And you're doing it with just one color of yarn, just one strand of yarn. She describes how to do this for things like the fingers of gloves, which could get very finicky if you're using a different technique for small circumference knitting. And I like it because in this case, I want the tube to actually lie flat. I don't want it to open up. And because this yarn is so fluffy, when I knit it in this technique, it ends up, the fibers kind of stick together, which is perfect because now it'll stay nice and flat. But it really is just a tube. And if I were to tug at it a little bit and pull the fibers apart, I could stick my hand right inside and open it up. I'm going to try something. You can see that one half of this is a little bit longer than the other half. That's because when I got to this point right here, I started working only half of the stitches. After I do probably 12 more rows, I will go back and do the other half. So then it's going to have kind of branched off. My plan is to then cross the two halves and join it back together as a single tube. Once I'm at the end, I will graft it. The stitches were cast on provisionally, so I have live loops at the beginning. So that little cross will kind of give a little design on the headband. I think that'll work. I haven't done this before, but I worked it kind of out in my brain and I think it should be cute. So I don't expect it'll take more than a day or two to finish this, which is fine because I am not going to be able to make it to the post office in the next couple of days. But hopefully by this weekend, this will be finished, everything will be packaged up, and I will go send it all off. All right, the next work in progress that I want to share is the Agnete Cardigan. This is a design by Petite Knit. Actually, this is the right side up. It's knit top down, and this piece is the back of the cardigan. So I've made it to the back. The next step is to pick up stitches along this edge, and I will knit one front, and then I will pick up stitches along this edge and knit another front. And then I think I join all of the pieces together to knit the rest of the body of the cardigan. And then finally I will go and pick up and add sleeves. So I'm loving this pattern so far. I think it's super, super clear the way that it's written. I'm very impressed. There are videos on the Petite Knit website that show in detail how to do some of the trickier techniques. It's going to be a long-term project. This is already quite a bit of hours, quite a few hours of knitting. And I expect this is only about 15% of the total sweater that has been knit so far. I'm gonna probably set it aside, let it rest for a little bit while I focus on some other things. But I just wanted to share the progress that I have made here. Okay. Now, as promised, I'm now going to give an update on the project that I've been working on that is one of the unknit sweaters in my stash. Last time I recorded an episode, I ran my program and it chose the Stripes Gone Crazy cardigan for me to make. And I have the beginnings of that cardigan right here. So this is also knit top down. So this is the beginning of it. I haven't made a ton of progress yet, but I think about an inch away from starting the first stripe, and then not long after that I will divide the sleeves and the body. Now, this pattern is brilliant. I am just really impressed with it so far. It's going to be a little tricky to show on camera, especially because this is still on needles and it hasn't been blocked or anything. But look at this beautiful sleeve cap construction. The way this sweater is constructed is that I first cast on stitches for the back, and then you add another ball of yarn and you do a couple short rows on one side, and then you do a couple short rows on the other side, and then you do a few rows all the way across the back, and then you pick up some stitches along the side, and then you pick up some stitches along the other side, and then you finally start knitting the front and back all in one piece. Meanwhile, you are making some increases, and it's just so tailored and polished, or you know, it will look more a little more polished once I get it blocked and finished. But I can see that this is just going to fit across the shoulder beautifully. I think it's brilliant not only that the designer is able to come up with that construction, but also it is explained incredibly well in the pattern. Now, this is a designer called Alpha Knits. It's a designer that I'm not familiar with and haven't seen any other patterns by. But let me tell you, I am going to look up and see what other patterns Alpha Knits has, because I'm just really impressed, and I haven't even gotten to the cool stripes portion of this project. I'm impressed with the construction and how unbelievably clear the pattern is. It's very complicated, but the way that pattern is laid out just really works for my brain. It's, you know, got kind of color coding for different sizes, but it's not in the obnoxious hard to read colors. And there's kind of in the margin a brief description of what you're doing at each step. For example, at one point in the margin it says, increase every row between sleeve markers. Something to that effect. So it really helps me to have that idea in my head of what I'm doing, instead of just reading the instructions that say knit to one stitch before the first marker, slip the marker, make an increase, and so on and so on. What's coming up next in the pattern is that I'm going to work these crazy stripes using short rows. I have 6 mini skeins in sort of a rainbow pattern, not the traditional primary colors, but in kind of a rainbow pattern that I'm going to be using to make the stripes. And I read through the whole pattern and kind of mapped out in my head and also in my Excel spreadsheet, because I make a spreadsheet with every pattern that I knit just to lay it out for myself and keep track of my yarn usage and so on. So I've mapped out the rest of the pattern, and it is just so clever the way that it's made. Now, this cardigan is not going to be for me. I don't have quite enough yarn to make an Annalee sized cardigan, so it's going to be a little bit smaller and will be given to someone in my life that wears a smaller size than I do. But that's okay for a number of reasons. Number one is that I don't need to keep everything that I knit. I knit so much. I don't have a need for 45 more sweaters in my wardrobe, but I plan to knit 45 sweaters over the next few years. So it makes sense to give many of them away to people that I love. And also, with this sweater in particular, the main reason that I chose to knit this is not for the finished object itself, although I think it will be beautiful, but because I was so intrigued by this very innovative design and construction method that I wanted to see how it was made and learn the techniques. And I am really glad that I have done that I've embarked upon this project. So not tons of progress yet, but that's okay. It'll get there. Okay, so what's coming up next? Technically, I guess I've got 3 works in progress right now. That headband will be done in a day or 2. I do have one other minor sort of work in progress. It's actually a repair. I have another pair of these leopard print socks because when I found this yarn on clearance, I went a little crazy and bought quite a bit because it was such a good price. And this sock that you see here was actually a completed sock. It was the first sock that I ever made using this leopard print yarn. And the idea was to make this pair of socks for my daughter. And, so I followed the pattern. When I got down to the toe, I just did 1 or 2 rounds in the plain blue before I started to decrease. But then when my daughter tried them on, we realized that they're actually quite big for my daughter. My daughter has pretty tiny feet, so using the entire length of that leopard print yarn actually makes for a foot that is too long to fit her. So this pair of socks, I had finished them and they were sitting in her dresser drawer for, I think, about 2 years. And finally I decided, you know what, she's not going to be wearing them anytime soon. Her feet may never get big enough to wear them. I'm just going to go get them out of her dresser drawer and use them for myself. When I got them out of her dresser drawer, I found a couple of holes. So you can see this is the top. This is the original top of the sock. And there were a couple of holes, which I assume is insect damage. I don't think we have moths here, but we do get carpet beetles. And even though I try to be meticulous about vacuuming and all of the things that you're supposed to do, this pair of socks, having sat inside of a dark dresser drawer for 2 years, fell victim to some insect damage. So what I did is I took the sock and I picked up the stitches below where the damage was. I inspected the foot of the sock and found that there was no damage on the rest of the sock. And I am just gonna re-knit a cuff and they will be short socks. So this is the first of them. The other sock in the pair doesn't have any damage at all, but I'm gonna do the same thing to the other sock just so that I don't have one tall sock and one short sock. But really the only thing I need to do here is about 15 rounds more of ribbing, and these will be done. So I barely count these as a work in progress. But wanted to share the sad story of the insect damage. It happens sometimes. So in a couple weeks, well, less than a couple of weeks, very soon, my husband and I are going to be going on a vacation. I love living in Seattle. I think it's just one of the most beautiful places in the world. But the winters can be kind of long and kind of dark. One thing that seems to get to me more than the weather is just the amount of darkness. Today is actually a beautiful day. There's a little bit of blue sky. But most days throughout the winter months here are very overcast. And besides that, the daylight hours are rather short. I work from home these days, but when I was working at the office, there were days in the winter where I would be in the office before the sun came up, and I wouldn't leave until after the sun came down, just because in the middle of winter, the daylight hours are so short. So that really gets to me. I can like feel it weighing on me, and we've prioritized finding or making time for vacations in the middle of winter to somewhere that's a little bit sunnier so we can experience some of that sunshine and soak it in. We haven't been able to do that over the last few years because of travel restrictions due to COVID. But this year, for the first time in 3 years, we are going to take a little winter vacation. So the school districts around here have a midwinter break, and both of my kids will be with their dad at that time. So my husband and I are going to take a little vacation, just the two of us, and enjoy a little bit of sunshine. And obviously, I'm going to want to enjoy some knitting while I'm on vacation. But none of the works in progress that I have right now, and really the only two real works in progress that I consider right now are the Stripes Gone Crazy cardigan and the Agnete cardigan. Neither of those I expect are going to make good travel projects. They're both, pretty complicated, small gauge. The Agnete cardigan is worked with a strand of wool and a strand of mohair. I would like to have another project to work on while I'm on vacation. Now, of course, I can always find a project that I'd like to make, but I really do want to chip away at these 45 unknit sweaters in my stash. So what I've decided to do is to run my program again today and let it choose the next project for me to start working on, even though I have not yet finished Stripes Gone Crazy. I don't mind having multiple projects going at the same time. In fact, I prefer it. I'm definitely not a monogamous knitter. Now, if the pattern that gets chosen is one that will work a little bit better for travel, then fabulous. I will bring that with me, and that can be my primary vacation project. If not, that's okay too. We'll just have to, have a little bit of a delay for my working toward finishing all of these unknit sweaters while I'm on vacation, and I will choose something else to work on. Alrighty, well, I went and I grabbed my computer so that I can run my program again, figure out what my new cast on will be. I'm not sure if I'll get started on it tonight. Depending on what it is, I will definitely try to get started on it before I go on vacation. Okay, I will show you my screen. Here we go. Oh, fun. Okay, my next project is the Chunky Dahlia V-neck. It's designed by, I'm probably going to butcher this name, Lena Holm Samso, using the lovely yarn Cascade 128 Superwash, held together with Fyberspates Cumulus. Okay, this is going to be a fun project because it is made with chunky yarn held with mohair. It should be a quick knit, but the final product is going to be quite striking. It has a beautiful lace design on the yoke. So I wonder, it might actually be possible for me to get much of the yoke done before I go on my vacation, and then I will have some nice plain stockinette knitting that I could do while on vacation. That chunky yarn wouldn't be the most ideal, but stockinette is perfect for doing while on vacation and hopefully enjoying some sunshine and whatnot. So we'll see how the next week goes before I leave. All right, one more thing before I get going. I can't believe that I've talked for this long already. I didn't realize I had that much to say today. Is that I want to show off something beautiful and new that was given to me as a gift. Just look at this. Look at these colors, the sort of pastel neon. So my birthday is coming up. I'm going to be turning 21 for the second time. And I have a very dear friend who, she started off as like a work friend. We worked together on the same team. Virtually, we hadn't met each other in person. And then finally I flew out to where she lives on the other side of the country for a work meeting, and we did get to meet in person. And it was one of those things where we had margaritas together and then instantly became best friends. We just clicked, and ever since then we text or chat or talk every single day, even though we don't get to spend much time together in person. But she started knitting not too long after we started becoming close friends. And so she is also one of my favorite friends because we talk about knitting all the time. It's just so fun. We've made several projects kind of together in our own little knit-alongs. So we have several garments that, we both have our own version of, which last summer when we had another work meeting, we deliberately wore our somewhat matching things to our work meeting. It's just loads of fun. And she very generously sent me this yarn set as a birthday gift this year. So this is a set of yarn from Qing Fibre, which I understand is a company out of London. This is the Xanadu fade, and I have no idea what I'm going to make with it yet, but whatever it is, it's going to be fabulous. My dear friend Alicia, thank you so much. I love you so much. And you know me so well because you know that I absolutely cannot pass up a good fade. I love a good yarn fade. And these colors are just so bright and cheery and yummy. I just may have to cast on something with these in the near future too. It's too bad there are not more hours in the day that I can spend knitting because there are so many things out there that I want to make. Thank you so much for being here with me. I hope I was mostly coherent today. The time just flew by. I think I said quite a bit because I'm in an excited mood today, probably because there's sun outside. It really lifts my spirits. But if there's anything that you have questions about or that I can clarify, please either comment or reach out to me. I have left quite a few links down below, including a link to my Ravelry queue, which shows the list of all of the unknit sweaters in my stash that I am trying to tackle within the next 3 years. I look forward to recording another video soon where I will update you on the progress of my Stripes Gone Crazy cardigan, as well as the beginnings of the Chunky Dahlia V-neck cardigan. Until then, bye.